The Grand Assembly Hall of the Interstellar Conclave had never been a quiet place. 500 delegates from across the known galaxy filled its enormous obsidian tiers, their voices layered into a constant low roar that echoed through the curved walls. Bioluminescent panels cast shifting light across scales, shells, feathers, and forms that no single word could describe. It was the oldest deliberative body in the known universe, and on most days it moved with the slow dignity of something that had survived 10,000 years of galactic politics. Today, it stopped cold. Ambassador Drexan of the Vorath Dominion stood at the central platform with all 4 of his upper limbs extended, his dark copper plating catching the chamber light like a blade. He did not raise his voice. He did not need to. When the Vorath spoke in this hall, even the air seemed to pay attention. "We have filed our territorial claim. The world designated Terrain 3, third planet of the Yellow Dwarf system in the Outer Reach. Our fleets departed 6 days ago." The silence that followed was not confusion. It was the silence of people who understood exactly what had just been said and were trying to decide how frightened to be. Ambassador Saloon of the Althari Collective rose slowly from his seat. His pale violet skin had gone noticeably gray. "You cannot proceed with this," he said. His voice was controlled, but his hands were not. Drexan turned to him with the practiced patience of someone who had already rehearsed this conversation. "And why not? You want the system for yourselves?" "That is not. The humans have barely achieved orbital flight. They still burn carbon-based fuel. Their fastest ships travel at a fraction of light speed." Drexan's plating rippled. "They are not a civilization. They are a curiosity." From the upper tier, Elder Delegate Malvin of the Thessavari closed all 4 of her eyes simultaneously, an involuntary gesture her species made when experiencing something they wished they could stop. A young delegate from the Quarren Assembly raised a slim hand. "If they are so primitive, why does the Conclave maintain restriction zones around their system? I have read the policy summaries. There are laws about this." The chamber did not erupt in response. It contracted, like something breathing in and holding it. High Arbiter Korvan, oldest active member of the Conclave, rose from the central seat. His species had no common name anymore. Younger races called them the antecedents, a word that meant simply those who came first. His voice, when it came, carried the particular weight of someone choosing each word the way a surgeon chooses an instrument. "There are protocols, very old ones," he said. Drexan spread his arms again. "Show me these protocols. Display them here." Korvan touched his console. A holographic column rose from the center of the floor, filled with documents marked in deep crimson, written in a script that fewer than 30 living species could read fluently. The text glowed with the particular shade of red the Conclave reserved for its highest-level classifications. Terrain 3 falls under Isolation Decree 9. No contact, no approach within 40 light-years, no observation beyond passive long range. The decree has been in continuous effect for 280 years. The young Quarren delegate leaned forward. What made it necessary? The Thessavari elder opened her eyes one at a time. "They still use nuclear weapons," Drexan said flatly. "They wage wars against members of their own species. Their governments disagree constantly. They have no unified command, no galactic standing, no treaties with any recognized civilization." He struck the platform railing with one closed fist. "You are all protecting your own interests and calling it caution." "You are making an error," Saloon said quietly, retaking his seat. His hands had stopped shaking, which somehow made him seem more afraid, not less. "Our fleet will reach their system in 9 days. The humans will be offered the choice to surrender. If they refuse, they will be subdued. Their world will serve the Dominion as a resource extraction site." He turned and walked toward the chamber exit, his footsteps deliberate and unhurried. From somewhere near the back of the hall, a sound emerged that no one had expected, soft, almost inaudible beneath the murmur of the crowd, weeping. It came from Ambassador Thessaly of the Maroon, a species that had navigated the stars for 3 millennia. She was old enough that her age was listed in the archive as approximate. She did not stand, she simply spoke, barely above a whisper, and the chamber went so quiet that every word reached the highest tier. "I was present for the Reach incident." The antecedent Arbiter Corvan did not look at her. He looked at the floor. "What incident?" the young Quarren delegate asked. She looked around the hall. The elder species were not answering. The Thesavari elder had closed all 4 of her eyes again. A Dravian council member had physically turned his chair away from the speaker's platform. Corvan brought up the classification overlay. Deep red filled the hologram again. "All records of the Reach incident are sealed at the highest clearance level. Access is restricted to species with a minimum documented age of 1,000 years. Drexan had paused near the door. He looked back. His plating shifted with something between amusement and contempt. "You expect me to feel fear because of a classified legend? We tried to warn the Keth Combine 230 years ago. They came to this very hall. They stood where you are standing. They listened the way you are listening." She paused. "We never saw them again." "What happened to the Keth Combine?" the young Quarren delegate asked. Corvain answered. His voice was flat and precise, the way someone speaks when they have rehearsed a terrible sentence until the emotion has worn away. "They are gone. Their fleets, their colonies, their homeworld, all of it." Drexan stared at him for a long moment. Then he laughed. It was a short, sharp sound that echoed once and died. "You expect me to believe that primitive chemical rocket builders destroyed an empire?" "Believe what you wish," Selyun said, not looking up. "We have done what we are permitted to do. The warning has been given." The great doors of the assembly hall closed behind Drexan with a sound like a final period at the end of a very long sentence. For a moment, no one moved. Then Corvain reactivated the emergency broadcast array. His message went out to every Conclave-affiliated world simultaneously. "Attention, all member civilizations. Emergency withdrawal protocols are now in effect. All civilian vessels are to vacate sectors within 150 light-years of the terrain system. Military fleets are advised to prepare for possible debris management and refugee support operations." A young Drellian delegate stood up. "Refugees from where? The only conflict is—" He stopped, looked at the star map still glowing on the display, looked at the distance markers, looked at the faces of the elder species. He sat back down without finishing his sentence. Thessaly rose finally, slowly, and made her way toward the exit. A young Quarren delegate reached out and caught her sleeve, not aggressively, the way someone grabs a railing in the dark. "Please," the young delegate said, "what actually happened? The Reach incident, what was it?" Thessaly stopped. She looked at the young face, at the genuine and frightened curiosity in it, and she decided to be kind. One ship, a human vessel, damaged beyond reasonable function, 37 crew members. She paused, gathering something. It encountered a Keth raiding fleet of 200 vessels. When we reached the coordinates following the distress signal, we found every single Keth ship destroyed or disabled. She paused again. The human vessel was still transmitting. "How?" the young delegate breathed. They had converted their ship into a weapon, piece by piece. Life support, navigation, hull plating, fuel lines. When there was nothing left to repurpose, they used themselves. Thessaly gently freed her sleeve. That was one ship, far from their world, with no support and no hope of rescue. She walked toward the door. Her final words came back over her shoulder, quiet enough that only the nearest delegates heard them. Now the Vorath are going to their home, to threaten their families, their children. A brief pause. May whatever forces exist in this universe show some small mercy to the Dominion fleet. Another pause, because the humans will not. The emergency lights had already begun to pulse when the hall finally emptied. Fleet Commander Ruvek stood at the forward observation rail of his command vessel, the Absolute, and looked at the yellow star the humans called their sun. It was unremarkable, a mid-sequenced dwarf, warm and steady, the kind of star that appeared 40,000 times in the Dominion's charts. Around it, 9 planets traced their slow orbits through empty space. The third one, small, blue-white, wrapped in cloud, hung at the center of his tactical display, like something placed there to be collected. "Report," he said. His operations officer, Var, ran her 4-fingered hands across the sensor array. "We are at the system boundary, Commander. Confirmed 9 planetary bodies. 3rd planet designated as primary target. Population estimate 8.2 billion, distributed across 7 major land masses. Defenses: none detected. No orbital platforms, no weapons arrays, no military vessels on sensors. The planet broadcasts radio frequencies, maintains a small network of communication satellites, and shows thermal signatures consistent with primitive industrial activity." She paused. "They have not detected us." Ruvek folded his arms across his chest plate. Around him, the full strength of the Vorath Third Expansion Fleet maintained perfect formation. 400 warships, the largest force the Dominion had deployed since the Surathi campaign. They had conquered 43 worlds with this fleet. Not one engagement had lasted more than 6 days. 8 billion beings, his tactical officer, Drexan, said. With no space-based defenses, this may be the least complicated operation in Dominion history. The communications station chimed. "Commander, we are receiving a transmission from the planet's surface. They are using broken Conclave Common. Translator is managing approximately 70% fidelity." "Put it through." A voice filled the bridge. It was calm, unhurried, slightly formal in a way that suggested training rather than comfort. "Unidentified vessels, this is the Terrain Unified Defense Coordination. We are reading your fleet on long-range instruments. Please identify yourselves and state your purpose." Drexan looked up from his console with an expression that, on his species, indicated amusement. "They call their radio operators a defense coordination." Several officers made sounds that translated loosely as laughter. Ruvek opened the return channel. "This is Fleet Commander Ruvek of the Vorath Dominion. We are claiming this system and all bodies within it as Dominion territory. You will stand down, cease all military preparation, and await formal surrender terms. You have 1 hour to respond." The channel closed. Ruvek turned to his weapons officer. "Prepare the primary bombardment array. Target population centers on the largest landmass. We will not fire until the deadline has passed, but I want full readiness." Confirmed. Far across the galaxy, in the Conclave Assembly Hall, a dozen observers watched the fleet's position on a deep space relay map. Thessaly had not left. She sat in her original chair, very still, watching the blue dot of Terrain 3 on the display. "They have not crossed the inner threshold yet," a young Quarren observer reported. "They are holding at the system edge." "They are waiting," Thessaly said. "For what?" "For the humans to respond." Saloon stood near the display. His voice was quiet. "For the humans to respond." And the humans asked for time. Time for what? Saloon watched the blue dot for a moment. To prepare. Korvan reactivated the withdrawal directive and extended the safe distance requirement to 200 light-years. The younger delegates reacted with visible shock. Ships from a dozen civilizations began repositioning towards the new boundary. Back in the terrain system, Ruvek's patience ran to its end of its measured hour. "Any response?" "Coming through now, Commander." The voice that answered was different from the first. Where the first was cautious and measured, this one was simply quiet. Quiet the way a large, stable structure is quiet, not because it is empty, but because it does not need to move to be powerful. "This is the Unified Defense Coordination of Terra. We have reviewed your demands."
"And?" Ruvek asked. "Our answer is no." Ruvek's plating shifted. "Then your world will—" "If you want our world, Commander," the voice said, without inflection, without drama, "come and take it." The channel ended. Silence on the bridge. Then Ruvek's plating darkened with controlled anger. "Target the uninhabited island chain in their western ocean. A demonstration strike. 3 plasma bolts. Show them the cost of that answer." Locked. Fire. 3 bolts of superheated plasma launched from the Absolute, illuminating the space between fleet and planet with brilliant light. They crossed the distance in seconds, entered the atmosphere in a streak of blue-white fire, and arced toward the island chain. 40,000 kilometers from target, the islands responded. Not with radio silence of empty land, not with the desperate, too-late scramble of a civilization caught unprepared. The islands erupted with disciplined, precisely targeted defensive fire, particle beam emitters emerging from positions that had shown nothing on any Vorath sensor. 2 of the 3 plasma bolts were intercepted and destroyed well above ground level. The third reached its target coordinates and struck an energy barrier that scattered the impact across a hardened field. Not a mark on the rock below. "Impossible," Ruvek said. The word came out before he could stop it. "The islands are not uninhabited, Commander," Var said, her voice careful and flat. "They are a concealed installation, weapons platforms, shield generators, sensor arrays, all of it masked. Our initial scan detected none of it." "How many more installations like that exist on that planet?" "Unknown. If one installation of that scale can evade our sensors—" She did not finish the sentence. She did not need to. Then the alarm started. Multiple contacts, Drevon said sharply, appearing throughout the system. Asteroids, no, ships behind the asteroids, behind the outer moons, in the debris rings of the gas giant. They are... He stopped. Report clearly, Ruvek said. They were here, Commander. They were already here. Stealth fields. We flew through them. On the tactical display, red contact markers bloomed like a rash across the system map. Not dozens, not scores, hundreds, emerging from positions that sensors had confirmed empty space minutes ago, taking formation with the particular efficiency of forces that have been waiting patiently for the right moment and have had a long time to practice. Those are not chemical rockets, Var said. Her voice had changed. Those drive signatures, some of those ships are older than our own models, much older. Ruvek stared at the display. His fleet still outnumbered the emerging human forces, but the geometry of the battlefield had shifted completely. They were no longer standing at the edge of a defenseless system. They were standing in the center of something that had been waiting for them with considerable patience. The communications station chimed again. "Commander, the humans are transmitting again." The calm voice returned. "Fleet Commander Ruvek, you have attacked our world. You have made your intentions clear. This is your final opportunity to withdraw your forces and leave our system. We outnumber you 4-1. Numbers, the voice replied, have never been the only measure of a battle. Last chance, Commander." He cut the signal. "All ships," he said, "attack formation, full engagement." In the assembly hall, Korvan watched the tactical display update and said nothing. Thessaly looked at her hands. Around them, the younger delegates were asking questions no one was answering, because the elder species had already seen where this was going, and none of them had the words for it.
The first human vessel that moved against the Vorath fleet was small enough that the Absolute's targeting system initially dismissed it as debris. Single contact, Drevon reported. Patrol class, moving on an unpredictable vector. He watched it for a moment. It is not following any tactical approach pattern I can identify. "Destroy it," Ruvek said. "Let the rest of them watch." 3 Vorath destroyers broke formation and charged their plasma cannons. Before they completed their targeting rock, the single ship split apart, not from damage, but deliberately, separating into 5 smaller craft that had been flying in extremely tight formation, so close that Vorath sensors had registered them as one object. The 5 craft scattered in completely different directions at velocities that their mass should have made impossible. "Those are fighters," Var said, "extremely small, individual pilots. Fighters that size cannot carry faster than light drives," the engineering officer said. "They are not using faster than light drives," Var replied. "They are using conventional propulsion at extraordinary efficiency." She paused. "Commander, they are engaging." The 5 fighters did not fire energy weapons. Instead, they launched solid metal slugs, dense, small, accelerated to a velocity that made them effectively invisible to targeting systems until impact. The rounds passed through Vorath shields without triggering the detection threshold. They were too small, too fast, calibrated for exactly the gap between what the shields were designed to stop and what physics allowed. One destroyer's primary hull ruptured along a seam. Another lost engine power as a round tore through a coolant manifold. The third spun away from formation, its bridge section dark. "How are they bypassing our shields?" Ruvek demanded. "The projectiles are below the shield's detection parameters," the tactical officer replied. Our systems are optimized for energy-based attacks and large kinetic missiles. These pass beneath both thresholds. Adjust the frequency. We are attempting to, Commander, but their attack patterns change constantly. Each adjustment we make, they have already accounted for. More ships entered the engagement, from above the system's orbital plane, from below, from deep within the asteroid belt using rocks as mobile cover. They did not operate in organized formation. They operated in what looked, from a tactical display, like complete disorder. Ships fired from unpredictable angles, broke off, came back from entirely different vectors, used debris from their own damaged vessels as cover. They have no coordination, Drexan said. That is the coordination, Ruvek replied slowly. He was beginning to understand. Each pilot was making independent tactical decisions based on local information. There was no central command to target, no formation to break, no predictable response to exploit. Fighting them was like holding water in a closed fist. The harder the grip, the faster it found the gaps. The communications array crackled, multiple signals coming from the human fleet simultaneously. The translator struggled and layered them into the bridge audio. Aggressive, rhythmic sound, voices shouting in their primary language, occasional phrases in Conclave Common. For our home. Come on then, is that all you have? Turn it off, Ruvek said. Before the signal cut, one voice came through cleanly. Commander, you picked the wrong star to fly toward. Then beneath it, human laughter. Not hysterical, not desperate. The kind that comes from people who are in the middle of something they have prepared for and find they are, in some fundamental way, exactly where they intended to be. The bridge went quiet. Sir, Drexan said, we have lost 61 ships. Ruvek looked at the tactical display. Red markers clustered where his vessels had been. They are not taking prisoners, he said. No, Commander, they are dismantling us. The communications officer looked up. Priority signal from the planet's surface, Commander. Different voice, senior authority. Put it through. Commander Ruvek, this is the Unified Defense Coordination. We are offering you a final withdrawal window. Once our regular military engages, we will not extend another.
Your regular military, Ruvek said. You expect me to believe that what is currently destroying my fleet is not your military? Check your long-range sensors, outer system, gas giant region. Ruvek looked at Var. She ran the scan. Her hands stopped moving on the console. She looked up at him and said, very quietly, Commander, there are additional contacts approaching from the outer system. Scale, I cannot get an accurate scale on them. They are larger than anything currently engaged, much larger. There are hundreds of them. On the display, new signatures began resolving from the deep dark of the outer planets. Not the improvised shapes of converted cargo ships, not the small, fast silhouettes of the fighters. These were purpose-built warships, and they moved with the patient weight of things that have spent a very long time being made ready for exactly this moment. Those ships have been waiting in the outer system since before you crossed the threshold, that human voice said. We tracked your fleet from the moment you entered this sector. Commander, what you have faced so far has been our civilian population defending their home. Those are our soldiers. I am offering you a chance to leave with your surviving ships intact. This offer expires in 4 minutes. Ruvek looked at the display. His 400 ships were now below 200. The outer system contacts were still resolving, still growing in number. Around him, his crew waited. Commander,
Drevon said softly. "We are surrounded." Ruvek's plating shifted slowly. He was not a coward. He had fought 43 campaigns without a single retreat. He had broken fortress worlds and dismantled fleets 3 times this size. "All ships," he said, "full assault, everything we have, fire." All remaining Vorath vessels fired simultaneously. Plasma filled the space around Terrain 3 in sheets, a display of power that had, on 43 previous worlds, been the last thing a civilization saw before it understood that surrender was the only path. The human fleet dispersed, not in retreat, not in disorganized flight, in the specific, practiced way of a force that has trained for exactly this response, scattering into individual movements that turned a coordinated bombardment into an exercise in hitting empty space. Ruvek watched his volley, which should have ended this engagement in seconds, dissipate across a field of nothing. And then the human ships came back. A converted cargo freighter, its engine signatures showing critical failure, accelerated directly toward the Vorath heavy cruiser Unbroken Reach. Ruvek ordered it destroyed. The targeting lock was clean. The shot was clean. The freighter struck the cruiser anyway, and the explosion that followed was so far beyond what any conventional fuel load could produce that the bridge crew of the Absolute had to shield their eyes. When the light faded, the Unbroken Reach was gone. Not damaged, not drifting, gone, a dispersing cloud of superheated debris across 300 kilometers. "What did they use?" Ruvek said. "Antimatter, Commander, a significant quantity. They converted their own vessel into a delivery mechanism." Ruvek stared at the space where the Unbroken Reach had been. "They flew that ship themselves?" "Yes, Commander." "They knew they would not survive?" "Yes, Commander." Another freighter, another ship that should not have been anywhere near the battle, a passenger transport of all things, accelerating toward a Vorath destroyer. Then another, then 3 more. The communications array picked up signals from the human vessels as they made their final runs. Not distress calls, not commands. Music. Their pilots were singing as they flew in. The Vorath bridge crew stood in silence and listened to it. Those voices, in a language none of them fully understood, singing something that was neither fearful nor resigned. It had the texture of something ancient and completely certain of itself. "What are they singing?" Ruvek asked.
The translator offered fragments, words about home, about the people waiting behind them, about not being the kind of thing that stops. "They are not afraid," his operations officer said. "No," Ruvek replied, "they are not." In the assembly hall, Thessaly watched the tactical display with her hands folded in her lap. The young Quarren delegate had stopped asking questions. She was simply watching now, the way you watch something you know you will need to remember. "Is it like before?" Selûne asked quietly. "The Kaith?" "Worse," Thessaly said. "The Kaith attacked a single ship far from this world. These people attacked their home. Their children are on that planet." She watched the display. There is no upper limit to what a human will do to protect their children. Korvan said nothing. He increased the evacuation radius to 300 light-years and watched more Conclave fleets quietly reposition themselves even further from the Yellow Star. Back in the battle, alarms on the Absolute multiplied faster than they could be acknowledged. "Commander," the systems officer reported,
We are experiencing a coordinated viral attack through our fleet network. It is spreading through our communications relay. Isolate it. We are attempting... Commander, it is adaptive. It identifies our countermeasures and generates new variants faster than our systems can respond. On the tactical display, a Vorath cruiser, third blade, turned its weapons on an allied ship and fired. Not from combat damage, from compromised systems. "How do they have our codes?" Ruvek demanded. "Unknown, Commander. The degree of familiarity suggests extended study, decades, possibly longer." Then the boarding pods arrived. Ruvek was informed by his tactical officer that small craft had latched to the hulls of multiple Vorath vessels and were cutting through with mechanical drills. Not energy-based cutting tools, mechanical drills that the hull's electronic defenses had no protocol for, because no civilized species had used mechanical drilling in 1100 years. Security teams were dispatched. Then the reports stopped coming from those teams. "Security teams are not responding," the tactical officer said. "Send more." 5 more teams went silent within minutes. What Ruvek could not see from the bridge, but what the surviving soldiers who made it back would describe for years afterward. Human figures in simple pressure suits, moving through Vorath corridors with a specific kind of economy. Not frantic, not charging. Moving the way people move when they are completely committed to a task and have done enough planning that the task itself requires no further decision-making. They carried bladed weapons, chemical propellant firearms, simple explosive charges, and they were taking everything apart, systematically from the inside. Power conduits, navigation systems, life support, not capturing ships, dismantling them, rendering them inert, ensuring they could not be used against what they had come to protect. "How are they surviving our atmosphere?" Ruvek asked. "Our internal air composition is toxic to..." "They brought their own air supply, Commander, independent sealed systems." Ruvek looked at the display. Less than 90 ships now. The human regular military was accelerating from the outer system. The civilians were still fighting. His flagship's internal alarms had begun. "Commander," the communications officer's voice had taken on a careful, deliberate quality. "Commander, we are receiving a transmission from inside the ship." Ruvek looked at him. "Inside the ship, Commander? From Deck 7? "Put it through." The voice was calm, not young, not old, the kind of calm that comes from training layered on top of training, layered on top of a very specific kind of belief. "Commander Ruvek, this is Warrant Officer Devon Holt, Earth Defense Corps. Your vessel's primary systems are no longer under your command. Engineering is compromised, weapons are offline, navigation is non-functional. I am asking you to order your remaining ships to withdraw. If you do, they will be permitted to leave." "That is..." Ruvek began.
"Check your display, Commander," his tactical officer said quietly. Every major system on the Absolute showed critical failure. The display was more red than anything else. Through the cracked forward viewport, Ruvek could see the remnants of his fleet, perhaps 40 ships, most trailing atmosphere and debris, already moving away from the planet. Not in organized retreat, just moving, the way things move when they have understood something clearly and have no more argument to offer. "Your decision, Commander," the human voice said.
Ruvek looked at what remained of his bridge, at Var, who had served with him for 19 years, at Drexan, who had 3 children back in Dominion space, at the others watching him with expressions he recognized, not of cowardice, but of the particular exhaustion that comes from having given everything you had and found it was not enough. For the first time in his career, not from fear, but from the specific clarity that comes when all false assumptions have been stripped away, Fleet Commander Ruvek of the Vorath Dominion spoke his next words. "All ships," he said, "withdraw, leave the system, now." Human voices echoed somewhere in the lower corridors of his ship, speaking in their own language. Whether they were giving orders or singing, he could not tell. Perhaps, he thought, with these beings, the difference was not always significant. The Absolute limped away from the blue planet. Behind them, the human fleet did not pursue. It reassumed defensive formation around Terrain 3, the same patient geometry it had held before the battle began, as if it had never been interrupted. Terrain 3 turned slowly in its orbit, quiet, unhurried, exactly as it had been. The return journey to Dominion space took 11 days. Ruvek spent most of them in the remains of the command bridge, not issuing orders, there was little functional equipment left to receive them, but reading. His intelligence officers had assembled everything the Dominion's archives contained on the humans, and he read all of it carefully, the way a person reads something after the fact that they should have read before. The Conclave's summons reached them on day 3. High Arbiter Corvan's face appeared on the one functional display screen, framed by the other senior Conclave members. His expression carried something that was not quite pity and not quite anger, something between the two, in the register of people who have watched the same mistake repeat itself and are tired in a very specific way. "Commander Ruvek, your surviving fleet is ordered to report to Conclave Station Meridian for full review. We acted within the parameters of Dominion territorial expansion policy," Ruvek said. The words felt strange in his mouth now, like something he had retrieved from a long time ago. "You acted within those parameters," Corvan said, "and we warned Ambassador Drexan, which he conveyed to your fleet command, of what those parameters would produce. You were warned. You are alive. Both of those facts are relevant." "Chancellor," Ruvek said, "I need to understand what we faced, the full account, not classified summaries." The Conclave was quiet for a moment. Then he did something unexpected. He nodded. The transmission expanded, and Thessaly stepped into the frame. Behind her, the vast holographic archive of the Conclave spread out, millions of catalogued records stretching back to the earliest periods of civilization, their light filling the chamber like a field of slow stars. "What you are about to see," she said, "has been classified at the highest level for 280 years. The Conclave restricted it not to deceive, but because we feared what civilizations would do with the information, either attack humanity in larger numbers or simply be paralyzed by the understanding of what humanity represents." She paused. Neither outcome serves anyone. The archive shifted. A star map from 280 years ago appeared, color-coded. Red for aggressive expansionist powers, blue for trading civilizations, green for scientific communities. The region near the terrain system was dense with red. "The Keth Combine," Thessaly said. At the time of their encounter with humanity, they controlled 41 star systems, maintained a military fleet of approximately 3,000 active vessels, and had never lost an engagement in recorded history. They specialized in rapid subjugation, locate a vulnerable world, disable its defenses, extract its population for labor, and move to the next target. They were effective because they were fast, and because most civilizations, faced with 3,000 warships, made rational calculations about survival. The display focused on a single vessel, small, battered-looking even in the archival image, registry markings in human script. The Yavanna, Thessaly said, a light exploration craft, crew of 37. It was humanity's second long-range mission beyond their own system. They had developed limited faster-than-light capability 2 decades prior and were still learning to use it. The Yavanna emerged from transit at the wrong coordinates and found itself in the center of a Keth raiding formation. The hologram showed the encounter's trajectory data, the Keth fleet surrounding the small human vessel, the demand for surrender. The humans refused, Thessaly said, simply. We know this from the sensor logs of a Conclave observation station in the region, which recorded what followed. The Yavanna had no military-grade weapons. Its shields were rated for debris and radiation, not combat. By every available metric, it should have surrendered within minutes, and the crew should have been processed into the Keth labor system within the week. She let the silence sit for a moment. Instead, the crew began disassembling their own ship. The archive footage was fragmentary. The observation station had been far away, and the resolution was poor by modern standards. But the outline of what happened was clear enough. The small vessel, surrounded by 200 Keth ships, becoming something other than a ship. Life support systems repurposed into chemical explosive devices, navigation processors rewired to guide improvised projectiles, hull sections detached and accelerated manually. They fought for 11 hours, Thessaly said, against 200 ships with pieces of their own vessel. When the final 3 crew members had nothing left to use, sensor records show them launching themselves in emergency suits directly at the last functional Keth ship. She stopped. The Keth ship was disabled. The 3 crew members did not survive. The display showed what the observation station's sensors had recorded afterward. The Yavanna's debris field, spread across a wide area, and among it 200 Keth ships, destroyed or drifting or venting atmosphere with no signs of active life. 37 people, Ruvek said, against 200 ships. Yes. And the Keth Empire? The survivors returned home and reported what they had encountered. The Keth Combine was not a civilization that frightened easily. They had conquered 41 worlds, but what they described caused their military council to authorize a complete eradication mission. They assembled every combat vessel they possessed. Thessaly's voice remained even. More than 3,000 ships. They set course for the terrain system with the intention of ensuring humanity would never become a threat. The star map shifted, course projections, timeline data, and then the end point, a debris field scattered across 90 light-years centered on the terrain system. None of them returned, Thessaly said. Ruvek looked at the scale of the debris field. He was a military commander. He understood ship counts and tonnage and force ratios. That outcome is not possible, he said, not in any engagement model I know. We said the same thing, Thessaly replied quietly. We spent a decade trying to understand it. We eventually stopped trying because each time we looked closely, we found something that made the answer harder to hold, not easier. Corvan stepped forward. The Conclave's conclusion, after 2 centuries of analysis, is this: humanity's approach to conflict operates on fundamentally different principles than every other species we have encountered. Other civilizations fight to achieve objectives, territory, resources, political outcomes. They calculate cost versus benefit. They stop when the cost becomes unacceptable. He paused. Humans fight to ensure that whatever is threatening them no longer exists as a threat. These are not the same objective. The difference sounds subtle. It is not subtle. The display shifted again to the present era. The same region of space, but transformed. The terrain system now surrounded by a layered network of installations. On the planet's surface, in orbit, on the moon, on the larger asteroids, in the deep dark of the outer system. Space elevators, long-range sensor arrays, weapons platforms scaled beyond anything the Conclave's treaties should have permitted. They built all of this, Ruvek said, while the galaxy assumed they were primitive. They built all of this, Corvan said, because they understood that the galaxy was watching and that something would eventually come. The quarantine protocol was meant to protect them, to give them time. They used that time well. Ruvek thought about the boarding teams moving through his ship's corridors, the pilots flying their ships in without expecting to fly back out, the voice on his internal calm and certain, explaining that his vessel was no longer his. "Why did the Conclave not tell us this?" he said. "All of us, every civilization. Why not simply explain what humanity is?" Thessaly and Corvan exchanged a look. "Because we were afraid," Thessaly said finally. "Not of humanity, of what the knowledge would do to us. Some civilizations would have attacked in greater numbers. Some would have become so afraid they would have destabilized entirely. And some," she stopped, "some would have had to confront a very uncomfortable question. Which is, humanity is not unique because they fight differently. They are unique because they have retained something that most advanced civilizations have spent thousands of years carefully eliminating. They have not forgotten why they fight. Every soldier on those ships, every civilian who flew a cargo freighter into your fleet knew exactly what they were defending, not abstractions, their families, their home, the specific, irreplaceable people waiting for them on that planet." She looked at him steadily. "Most of our civilizations gave that up long ago. We developed professional militaries so our civilians wouldn't have to feel war. We developed strategic deterrence so our soldiers wouldn't have to fight. We made conflict clean and distant and manageable." A pause. "The humans never did. And so when the moment came, they did not have to reconnect with something they had lost. They simply were what they had always been." Ruvek said nothing for a long time. "The 47 ships I have left," he finally said, "you indicated we were allowed to survive." "You were," Corvan confirmed. "That was a choice, their choice. Yes. They could have destroyed everything. Yes. Commander Ruvek, you attacked their world. You threatened their people. You fired on their planet." Corvan's voice was not unkind. "Consider that carefully on your journey home." The transmission closed. In the silence that followed, Var came to stand beside Ruvek at the forward viewport.
Earth had long since disappeared from any visual range. Ahead of them was empty space, and then, eventually, home. "What do we report?" Var asked. Ruvek looked at the stars for a moment. "The truth," he said. "All of it."
The conclave session that followed was unlike any in living memory. Every major civilization sent its highest authority, not ambassadors, but heads of government, military commanders, elder councils. The obsidian tiers of the assembly hall, which normally held 500 delegates, were packed with twice that number, others watching via relay from their own worlds. The younger civilizations sat in silence for once, having apparently decided that this was a session for listening rather than speaking. Ruvek stood at the central platform and gave his account. He spoke for 3 hours without interruption, which was itself remarkable in a chamber known for its procedural interruptions. He described every engagement, every decision, every moment where he had applied logic that was correct by every standard he knew, and had found that the humans had already accounted for that logic and built something underneath it. When he finished, the hall was quiet. Drexan of the Vorath Dominion was not present. He had been recalled by the Dominion's governing council 3 days after the battle, and was currently the subject of an internal review that, by all accounts, was not going well for him. The Vorath's formal apology had been transmitted to Earth shortly after, a document of considerable length and considerable discomfort, drafted by people who were very clearly not used to writing apologies and had done their best. The humans had acknowledged it with characteristic brevity. Received. Do not let this become necessary again. The conclave's formal resolution, passed unanimously after Ruvek's testimony, did several things. It extended the quarantine protocol around the terrain system to 300 light-years. It reclassified humanity's status from pre-contact primitive civilization to something that required 3 hours of debate to name properly, and which ultimately was designated simply as recognized sovereign force of first standing, a category that, technically, had never been applied to any civilization before. It also unsealed the Keth archive for all member civilizations. That part took the longest to agree on. Several civilizations argued against it on the grounds that it would cause widespread panic. Corvan had listened patiently to these arguments and then explained in his measured way that civilizations which did not understand what humanity was were civilizations that would eventually make Drexan's mistake, and that the Conclave was no longer willing to watch that happen. The archive was released. The reaction across the galaxy was, in the weeks that followed, complex. Some civilizations panicked exactly as predicted. Some became paralyzed with fear. Some spent considerable resources trying to understand how the Yavanna had done what it had done, a question that the archive itself could not fully answer, because the sensor data showed the outcome but could not explain the mechanism in any terms that made sense using existing models of warfare. But something else happened, too, in some of the older civilizations and a handful of the younger ones, something quieter. People began to read the archive not as a threat assessment, but as something else. The fragments of footage from the Yavanna's final hours, the sensor logs of the Keth engagement, and then, because some researcher somewhere had the instinct to look, the transmissions the Yavanna's crew had sent in its final hours, not military communications, personal messages, directed at no one in particular, since they had no way of knowing anyone was receiving them. Just human voices, speaking to the people they had left behind on a small blue-white planet that they knew they would never see again. The translator algorithms had to be refined 3 times before the recordings became fully intelligible in Conclave Common. When the translations were finally released, they were downloaded more times in the first week than any document in Conclave history. The messages were simple. They talked about people by name, described specific things they wanted those people to know. A woman with a sister who she needed to tell something she had been avoiding for years. A man describing his daughter's laugh to the empty frequency because he needed someone, anyone, to know that it had sounded exactly like that. An older crew member talking about a garden of all things, a garden on a particular hillside and the smell of it after rain. None of them asked for rescue. None of them expressed regret for the decision to fight. None of them begged. They simply spoke the names and the details of the things they loved into the dark, for no other reason that those things deserved to be spoken.
Thessaly, when asked about the reaction to the released recordings, said only, "Now the galaxy understands." She did not elaborate. She did not need to. Earth's response to the Conclave's resolution was a single transmission, delivered in clear Conclave Common by a human spokesperson who was not military, a diplomat by her title, though she spoke with the same quality of quiet certainty that seemed to characterize every human who had ever addressed the galaxy. We acknowledge the Conclave's resolution and its recognition of our sovereignty. We have no territorial ambitions. We have no interest in expansion beyond our system. We want to live. We want our people to grow and learn and build things, and we want to do this without having to spend our resources preparing to defend against civilizations who have decided we look like an opportunity. A pause. We have been preparing to defend ourselves for 300 years. We would have preferred to spend those 300 years on other things. We are asking for the chance to do that now. Another pause. If that request is honored, we will be the kind of neighbor that makes this galaxy better. We are good at building things. We are good at solving problems. We have ideas about energy production, agriculture, medicine, and a dozen other fields that we think would interest you. We would like very much to share them. And then, with perfect timing, if that request is not honored, you already know the alternative. We will not repeat ourselves. The transmission ended. In the assembly hall, the silence lasted for perhaps 10 seconds. Then, from the upper tier, a single civilization's representative began the formal gesture of their species that indicated agreement and respect. Then another. Then, in the slow cascade of a room full of beings who had just understood something important at the same time, the entire hall followed. It was not applause in any human sense. It was the specific recognition of a galaxy that had spent 300 years being afraid of something it misunderstood, and had now arrived, through considerable cost and embarrassment, at a more accurate understanding. Ruvek watched it from the side gallery, where he had remained after his testimony. Var stood beside him. "What happens now?" she asked. Now, he thought about it. Now we find out if the galaxy is wise enough to deserve the neighbors it has. Var looked at the main display, where the terrain system glowed steadily at the center of its buffer zone, small,
blue-white, quiet. Do you think it is? Ruvek considered the archive footage he had spent 11 days reading, the Yavana's crew, the civilians who had flown cargo ships into his fleet, the boarding teams who had walked through his corridors singing, the voice on his internal calm and certain, offering him the chance to walk away. I think, he said carefully, that humanity has spent 300 years being ready for the worst version of this galaxy. He watched the blue dot on the display. I think they would very much like to be wrong about us. A pause. I think we should try to give them the opportunity. Somewhere across the light years, on the third planet of a yellow star, in cities and towns and small places that no conclave survey had ever properly catalogued, 8 billion people were doing what they had always done, building things, arguing with each other, raising children, planting gardens on hillsides, telling each other the things they had been avoiding saying for years. They had won their battle. They had not stopped being human for a single moment of it, and the galaxy, finally, was paying attention.